Haunted roads are usually the subject of folklore or urban legends. Drive in a circle around the old cemetery and flash your lights 3 times. And it's said that the goat man will appear. But there are some roads that make you wonder if there's something a little bit more than just creepypastas at play. There's Clinton Road, Route 66, Archer Avenue, and my personal favorite, Shades of Death Road. Yes, that's actually a thing. But there's one road in Illinois that may lay claim to being the granddaddy of them all, and the stories attached to it are: Cuba Road is an isolated stretch outside Barrington, Illinois. It's located in a sparsely populated but wealthy area of the state and has gained a reputation as a place of eerie and peculiar occurrences. It is also the home of White Cemetery, a small graveyard dating back to the 1820s, who many maintain is a primary source of the odd phenomena that takes place there. Cuba Road also has close ties to the era of the Chicago mobsters who would travel it to access recreational opportunities and to take advantage of the region's excellent lake fishing. Al Capone was among those who were rumored to vacation in Lake County. But their continued presence there, along with others, have left an indelibly paranormal mark on Barrington that has spanned generations. Barrington, with a population of around 10,000, is an otherwise pastoral community and has all the ambiance of a typical affluent suburb with large houses and immaculate lawns. At one point, reality TV star Kristen Cavallari and Minnesota Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins called it home. Its residents have an odd kind of love-hate relationship with the gangsters who once retreated there. In 1934, the notorious Babyface Nelson was on his way home to Barrington when his life was claimed during an intense machine gun battle. In a weird homage, the town held a reenactment of the shootout in a parking lot near a McDonald's in 2015. A plaque had been erected commemorating the site of the bloody encounter near Langendorf Park. Haunted roads are not unique in any way, but if there are varying layers of spookiness involved, then Cuba Road must be considered in the top tier. Over the years, White Cemetery has been a particular source of strange and terrifying activity. The most prominent have been the appearance of peculiar balls of light that have been witnessed hovering above or floating through the headstones. The sightings aren't limited to thrill-seeking teenagers or intrepid ghost hunters. They have also been reported by local police as well as motorists passing by. The lights are said to move freely about the grounds, pass over or through the surrounding fences, and sometimes onto the road that passes by. White Cemetery has also been the scene of an eerie phenomenon that involves indistinct figures that roam the grounds. Often they're seen at the edge of the fence or in close proximity to trees that dot the landscape. They have been said to vanish as quickly as they appear, and despite many years of investigation, it's not yet known what their manifestation means or the possible source of their existence. There have also been reports of these figures moving out of the cemetery and onto the road, with passing motorists on more than one occasion informing police they have witnessed a UFO or extraterrestrial being. Visitors have long claimed hearing the sound of disembodied footsteps crunching over the leaves, following them as they move about the cemetery, as well as otherwise well-secured tombstones falling over by themselves with no discernible reason how. Ron Carlson, who lists architect, inventor, pilot, and explorer among his many achievements, and is the author of a book called Into the Unknown, which chronicles his adventures as a bush pilot, tells a very intriguing story about a haunted home located just off Cuba Road. While still in college in the 70s, he and a friend named Mike, along with his sister Audrey and her friend Dawn, sought to find the home where a young boy named Jonathan had been struck by lightning through a window and killed. They drove his Jeep down a muddy dirt path toward where the house was supposed to be, having read the address in the newspaper. Eventually they came upon a clearing where they saw a 2-story boarded-up house that looked like something out of a horror movie. The front door was ajar, so huddled together they walked inside, stepping on and over broken glass which covered the floor. A stairway led up to the second floor where Jonathan was killed. Mike started up the stairs but hit a weak spot and fell through them. Undaunted, they again climbed the stairs and came to a hallway. Walking down the hall, they found what they believed was the master bedroom and continued on to what they assumed were 2 other bedrooms, one surely being the boys'. As they entered one of them, they saw a boarded-up window and the unmistakably gruesome sight of dried blood on the floor. Shining a flashlight on it, Mike suddenly let out a yell, and turning to look at what he was seeing, both men clearly saw an apparition in the corner of the room and the sound of crying. The girls who had remained in the hallway both screamed, and all 4 fled the house as quickly as they possibly could, jumped into the Jeep, and tore out of there. On Cuba Road, the disturbing appearance of phantom vehicles near the cemetery has been a long-standing assertion by motorists who have encountered them. One has been described as a limousine that seems to be traveling normally until it suddenly vanishes. The others are a bit more unnerving. Multiple reports describe one as a pickup truck and the other a 60s muscle car that seemingly come out of nowhere with its high beams on, driving up on the bumper of the car in front of it at a very high rate of speed. Motorists, fearing the possibility they are being run off the road, stop until the vehicle simply vanished, with the frightened driver realizing they are now suddenly and eerily alone. There have also been claims of translucent cars that turn into white cemetery and suddenly vanish. Not unlike many reputedly haunted roadways, Cuba Road also lays claim to a number of spectral hitchhikers, the most terrifying of which is a cigar-smoking man closely resembling a Prohibition-era gangster who has been known to unexpectedly appear in the rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat of a passing vehicle, before vanishing. Given the constant presence of bootleggers who populated the area back then, it's assumed one of their spirits still lingers. Another hitchhiking specter is the old woman carrying a lantern that's seen walking the side of Cuba Road. On more than one occasion, she has signaled for a concerned driver to pull over, and as they do, she will vanish from sight as she is about to enter the vehicle or immediately after boarding it. While not hitchhiking per se, there have been numerous reports of a shadowy couple walking hand in hand down an otherwise deserted Cuba Road in the summer or fall, and sometimes walking into White Cemetery before vanishing into the distance. There is yet another bizarre story that concerns an old farmhouse that was confirmed to have stood on the side of the road for many years. Research supports that it burned down many years ago, with some unsubstantiated claims that its owner perished inside of it. But physical evidence of the house in the form of rubble existed until the early 1980s. It was located at the intersection of Route 59 and White Cemetery, 1 block west of the graveyard. People, particularly those driving past, have reported actually seeing the house in its former state, sometimes with lights on, as real as it was before the fire that claimed it. On the return trip, the house no longer exists in the spot where it was seen and has seemingly vanished. There have also been occasional reports of seeing it on fire or feeling the heat emitting from the general area surrounding it, as well as seeing it in different locations. In what likely falls in the category of urban legends that have been added on to the more long-standing paranormal claims, there are those of a ghostly man who steps out in front of cars, forcing drivers to stop after they feel the impact of hitting him, only to find no one there. But the most unsettling stories concern a haunting at 92 Rainbow Road, a side street off Cuba Road. Deep in the woods is an iron gate that opens to a long driveway, leading to a piece of property on which once sat a house that bore all the trappings of opulence. It featured amenities that few had when it was first built in the early 1960s: satellite TV, marble floors, a private gas station, a waterfall beneath a grand staircase that emptied into a koi pond. Its owner was wealthy real estate developer Robert Krilich, who, among other things, owned a stable of racehorses that would compete at Arlington Park. Its powder room featured velvet wallpaper and 24-karat gold fixtures. It became a turkey and squab farm run by his family, which employed groundskeepers and household staff members. But prior to its existence, the area had a much darker history. Its first white settlers were agriculturists who plied their trade in an isolated region that was a comfortable distance away from any form of government intrusion. But the lack of lawful restrictions would eventually lead to a type of frontier-style justice. In one case, a farmer named Peter Davison shot and killed John Robertson, a road commissioner and prominent member of the community who was traveling the route Davison claimed infringed on his orchard. As covered earlier, 1930s-era mobsters descended upon the town of Barrington in droves, as it presented a perfect place for a bit of R&R or to lay low when the heat on them was turned up. The occasional mob hit was known to take place there, with the ideal combination of relative seclusion and little intervention by local authorities, encouraging such things to happen from time to time. A Capone capo named Mike DePike Heitler, a suspected informant, was once locked in an ice house that was then set ablaze so as to not leave any trace of him behind, save for a set of false teeth. Then there was the horrific 1972 slaying of retired insurance executive Paul Corbett, his 58-year-old wife Marion, stepdaughter Barbara, and sister-in-law Dorothy by the De Mau Mau Group, a unit of militant black Vietnam veterans who intended to rob the home but wound up slaughtering everyone living there. The crime was eerily reminiscent of the 1969 Manson family murders that were still fresh in the minds of the residents of Barrington and confirmed their idyllic suburban lives were not beyond the reach of human brutality. But the house at 92 Rainbow Road seemed to be the antithesis of all that was wrong in the world, and it also featured the most eccentric diversion of all: alligators that were brought in to stock one of the ponds. The beasts were said to get loose once in a while and wander into the house, resulting in preschool shouts of "somebody go get the alligators" to echo through the home. It was, according to Robin, the third of the 6 children, a fairy tale house. But the fairy tale took on a dark narrative when on February 19, 1968, Billy Kokenauer, the 7-year-old son of the live-in groundskeeper, climbed a concrete bird bath near the main house's front door. His then 4-year-old sister Carol recalls hearing the structure wobbling before Billy lost his footing and falling to the ground, grabbing the top of the structure and toppling it over on top of him. His 9-year-old sister Robin, who watched all of this unfold through a window inside the house, recalls things being dramatically different. She claims she saw the bird bath lift itself into the air, move slightly, and then fall atop her brother. When police arrived to investigate the matter, she insisted the structure didn't tip over, but floated in the air. The Korkenauers moved out shortly after the accident, but Robin remained certain that something otherworldly was taking place on that property. Even before her brother's passing, She recalls listening to something that sounded like chains being dragged in the attic above her bedroom, and her mother and aunt frequently blessing the attic with holy water, which did nothing to stop the eerie sounds that she claims plagued her childhood. Billy's catastrophic death might explain why many people who have visited the site report seeing the figure of a young boy in the driveway or the general area around the abandoned property wearing overalls and a white t-shirt. The earliest sightings occurred before any of the details of Billy's death were made public. It should also be noted that his sister Carol confirmed Billy was wearing overalls at the time of his death. Colin Santee, who lived with his family on the property in the 1980s when his father was the property caretaker, remembers the good times spent there with bands playing, barbecues, and the general enjoyment that came with living there, but also maintains there was a malevolent presence that lurked in the shadows. He recollects seeing what he plainly describes as a ghost in his room, which was located in another dwelling on the property, and chasing it down the hall wearing only a pair of pajamas. He labeled the entire place Crazy Haunted. By the mid-1980s, the Krillick real estate empire included shopping centers, country clubs, and developments in Tennessee and Florida. But Krillick began to face a host of legal issues as well as divorce proceedings. In 1994, he would eventually face federal charges for bribing and defrauding the government to finance multiple construction projects. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison for racketeering, 14 counts of fraud, and was required to surrender assets totaling $8.6 million. The family moved out of the home in 1986, taking some pieces of their furniture and valuables, but leaving behind silverware, paintings, and all manner of other items to the caretakers and staff. One such piece was a statue resembling a goat-like being with horns that sat by the fireplace. With the staff in time moving on and having easy access to an abandoned house in town, local teenagers took full advantage by scaling its privacy wall to initially observe any possible paranormal goings-on there, but eventually commandeering the house for use as a party palace. Over time, curiosity and thrill-seeking gave way to looting and vandalism, and the once magnificent property began to fall into ruin. Santee decided to return to the property with some friends sometime in the early 90s. They snuck into the basement and were a bit stunned to see pentagrams drawn on mirrors, walls, and floors, and pseudo-satanic altars lined with candles mixed in with the general rubble and trash strewn all over the place. By the mid-90s, the property and grounds were a shell of its former self as the earth began to reclaim it. It was handed over to the Lake Zurich Fire Department for training purposes, but even then, recalls one resident who would ride his four-wheeler on the property, visitors were often treated to weird sounds coming from the house. He could never say for certain if someone was inside or speakers were set up to scare trespassers off, but the sounds were present and clear. Eventually, the town demolished the house, leaving only a silo and barn as remnants of the stunning property that once stood at 92 Rainbow Road. That is, until the barn burned to the ground. No one was ever brought to justice for the crime. Anyone searching for the estate at the end of what was once the long driveway leading to it is now treated to a suburban cul-de-sac in an upscale residential neighborhood.